the conversation was, is that detrimental to my business? Should I be leaning into the collectible art house, this is the creme de la creme thing, or do I just keep showing up and making dumb jokes about ourselves and focus on doing what we can to make the thing better? And that's always been our mindset of we don't think of ourselves as artists about it. I don't, I'm not into that element of the business. I just want to show up and have fun and make good guitars and hopefully not be quite as broke as the year before and just kind of keep,
incremental
find ways to pay bills.
Yeah. I'm very pleased to have Doug Cower as my guest today on Life with Strings Attached. Who would have known that access to a computer, a love of The Simpsons, and a joke about a flying pig called the Bacon Fairy would have launched a business? Doug Cower, always the least serious person in the room, started building guitars when a lifetime of woodworking merged with a love of guitar. Spurred on by the support of others, Doug found his direction in what appealed to him: less mainstream, jet-set design, combined with a tireless pursuit of improvement. Started officially in 2008, Cower Guitars reflects the love of craft, creativity, and dumb jokes that Doug is known for. I've very much enjoyed my conversation with Doug Cower, and I hope that you do too. Doug.
Hey.
Great to see you. Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for squeezing me in my weird schedule.
Oh, is it a weird schedule for you? What time is it there? It's like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, isn't it?
I don't know. I usually try to do these kind of not middle of the day, but it's the only opening I've got. So here we are.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still in Europe at this point in time. And so I have Groundhog Day. The day for me progresses, but everybody I speak to, you're the fourth or fifth interview today, and everyone is 9 o'clock. I started in Shanghai, and now we're out in California. I made a few stops along the way today, so it's everyone's morning except for mine. So thank you for accommodating and making the time for this. Really appreciated this. So
no, my pleasure.
Yeah. How's life out there with Teresa and the kids and business? All's well?
It's fine. Yeah, kids are good. Teresa's great. Business is what it is. It's been an interesting year. It's kind of, yay. No, it's okay. The first half of the year was really pretty good, and then we knew it going in this year that election years are just tough for us, and both mentally and actually for the business. It just kind of sucks all the air out of the room for a few months, and it's kind of starting to show a little bit of signs of life again. And just same old, just trying to plan NAMM and make sure all our ducks in a row for the holiday stretch here, and hopefully get everything done before I leave the area on Saturday and get out of town for a few days and enjoy our Thanksgiving away from the shop. And the same old scramble.
Nice. All right. Well, there's I don't know that he's very well known there in California, but there's a Canadian musician by the name of Bruce Coburn who he wrote a line that said, "You got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight." And in your case, maybe you have to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight, or maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
See if you can.
I see what you did there. That's funny. Depending on when this goes out, that may be more present than you realize.
Oh yeah, why is that?
Well, we realized that basically this is literally this month or next month is the 15th anniversary of Daylighter. And so we did a little limited run of 5 guitars, and we're going to try to do hopefully maybe 2 more batches of kind of 5. We picked ironically, this first one is not the Daylighter that launched in 2008, 2009. I guess it'd be 2009. It's a later version of Daylighter, but it's kind of how we could step our way back up to doing that. And so those are wrapping up right now. We're gonna do a little 5 guitar run, and a couple dealers have already snatched a couple up, and we'll see. Yeah, that'll be kind of fun.
Great. Is that something you'll be showing at NAMM?
I don't know if we're going to show it at NAMM, to be honest, because it's such a limited thing. I don't think so. I don't really have any like desire to bring that model back full time. It's kind of a space that we stopped making it partially because I like to rotate the lineup, and then so many other people kind of jumped in doing the offset thing that we've kind of moved off to other things. But we'll see. I'm not, probably not the best hype machine here. I'm not necessarily putting a cap on it, but I don't see us doing more than maybe 10 or 15 of these things. I'd like to just keep them as little batches.
So the market got too big. It was too successful for everyone else. So you said, fuck it.
Kind of.
This thing has too much potential. I'm out of here.
I think it was, I wish. I mean, if that was the case, we'd still be doing it.
Yeah.
It just, it kind of seems like whatever we make, maybe with Banshee being the one exception, it has a certain amount of life in it.
Yeah,
and then it just kind of tapers off. And then I get either bored or want to work on something new, and it doesn't really quite maybe have the demand there enough to keep it in the lineup. And we're kind of struggling through that right now with some of the stuff that's hitting around that same window of like, does it stay? Does it go? Does we work on something new? And it's also, it's a jazz master shape, but our DNA on it. So we kind of segued into things that were more original in my work at the time. So we'll see. It's more that it kind of I think part of that might be the slowdown is everybody was kind of getting into that. I feel like Dennis Fano and I kind of helped create that genre of the offset mashup or offset fusion. I don't know. It's the guitar. And then, a lot of people kind of jumped in on it. And maybe that's what drove it down. I don't know, keeps the resale value up, I guess, right? There's not a ton of daylighters floating around on Reverb. So that's always a nice thing.
Right. Keeping it fresh is a challenge, because it's something I run across all the time. Our need for change is not necessarily the market's need for a change sometimes. I learned that early on in life. I would keep screwing around with my business all the time because I needed change. And there were times where like, that was working just fine. You need to leave that alone. Just because you need change doesn't mean you need to change that thing. Go do something else. And so that's a challenge when you're understanding that you might become a little ho-hum about it, and then recognizing what the outside perspective of that is versus your own feelings.
The funny version of that is that's how I have to remind myself about social media. I'm bored to tears of showing the same process over and over again because, standing in guitars is boring or whatever. I do it every day, all day, but I have to kind of remember that somebody who just started following us maybe hasn't seen us talk about those stages. And it doesn't make me any better at it. But it's that same argument of like, it's one of those things of like, okay, it might be boring to me, but it's not boring to somebody else potentially. And some of that with the design element, and creativity end of it is keeping me entertained. I call it slow forming ADD, where it's like, I can focus and do a job, but sometimes after the 100th of that one thing, I'm pretty bored of it or whatever. So that spurs the creative end of it a little bit. But some of it also when we're making those lineup decisions and what's in the lineup, some of it is practicality. I can't have 40 different things in the lineup at one point in time. And some of it's just, oh, wow, those are starting to pile up on the inventory rack, or starting to pile up in the, we've got these painted, but, nobody's taking the ones ahead of it. So that kind of forces it too a little bit. So I like to think I'm less negative to myself and more attuned to the market, just usually much too late to be adapted to the market quickly.
Well, the need for novelty is a valid need. That if you were, my whole career's existed in novelty. I'm known for walking through the door and showing someone they haven't seen before, or showing something new and fresh, or a fresh perspective or a fresh take on it, and and so if I were to think for a moment on your guitars, your guitars are your uniquely Cower approach to existing icons for the most part, right? So they're a synthesis, they're sort of a refinement of existing American icons for the most part, and a really truly American guitar. And so, and when I say that, I don't mean because it's made in America, but I mean your guitars have the DNA of the American guitar. They have the response of an American guitar. They feel like an American guitar. Guitars go to other places in the world and they adopt them and they create them. And often, this is potentially going to sound like a backhanded comment, and I do not mean it that way. So bear with me for a second, Doug.
Oh, I can't wait.
they over refine the American guitar and they try and make it too perfect, and actually it loses its mojo when that happens.
Sure.
That there's there's a certain amount of kind of inefficiency of movement, a bit of plunkiness that needs to happen within, like a really perfect kind of, I've had this, let's take it away from your guitars for a second. I've taken really perfect Telecasters to Nashville. It's not a Telecaster. It's not at all what they want in that guitar. They want a plunky sort of, not a lot of sustain, because that's where the whole chicken picking thing comes from and all that sort of fast response, and you take this perfectly made, beautiful guitar that has lots of sustain and everything and looks like a Telecaster, but it doesn't function as a Telecaster.
Doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the same argument for, vintage muscle cars. Is obviously, that was not obviously, because people would know that. That's my background. I grew up, restoring first gen Firebirds and stuff.
Yeah.
And that car is a terrible car by all said and done compared to, as a functional car goes, a brand new Toyota Camry is a million times better as a car than my 69 Firebird was. But I know which one's way cooler, and maybe the deficiencies in that car and, makes it be that thing. And obviously the design's cooler or whatnot, but there's a certain thing to that. And I also kind of wonder in that argument of what a guitar was, what a guitar is now, vintage versus that, is the willingness to accept that this thing that we all put on a pedestal as the holy grail of 59 or 60 or whatever, they weren't necessarily great guitars and always. And the rest of the market, everything went around those to make, amps were designed around those, pedals were designed around those, pickups were designed around those, and then everything kind of worked symbiotically because that was what was available.
Yep.
And then when you do start solving issues, or not that we don't try to solve issues, but there is a certain element of don't lose the forest from the trees here, and embrace a little bit of that quirkiness. And the Telecaster is a great example. It should be a guitar that does a very specific thing, and if you don't want to, we make a version that does other things, but we can make the version that does that one specific thing very well. And Banshee is kind of the same thing, and I get it totally. True mastery is not necessarily in removing all of the imperfections. It's knowing exactly how much to remove or not. Or at least, and I think I kind of wonder about that sometimes with, everybody's had that customer or that person that finds the tiniest little flaw in, there's a dust speck in the finish, or there's this little one thing. And I'm like, does that intrinsically make this a worse guitar? Or are you looking for a level of perfection that will also inhibit you from actually enjoying this thing? Did you buy the, $500,000 Ferrari and you're too afraid to let it leave the garage?
Right.
Did you, it's that thing of okay, I get your point here, but at the same time, you gotta remember that we're a 6-person shop and I don't have the infinite resources to throw at sometimes this thing to get that 0.001% better. And where I can put my resources is making sure that it plays 0.001% better or sometimes, but the little, that little imperfection that honestly is on every guitar. There's something. Nobody's ever made a perfect guitar in the history of mankind. And anybody who claims they have is either a liar or delusional, and not good at the business. If you honestly believe that, where do you go from there? If you're not trying to make the next one a little bit better, what's the point? But I don't want it to be at this expense of you can't touch it and don't enjoy it. Oh no, it's going to get a mark on it, or or whatever. I want the thing to be a functional tool that you can enjoy and play. And if you scratch it or dent it or whatever, it sucks. I get it, but it's not the end of the world. At least you're playing it, and that's the whole point of it. That's my excuse, at least, for not being better at my job.
Doug, you've been doing this a lot of years now. You were just talking about the 15th anniversary of one of your guitars, and there's not a lot of guitar makers who get to talk about their 15th anniversary. By far, most of them have come and gone by that point in time, and you stood the test of time, so you're doing something right, my friend. And so
just keep stubbornly sticking at it and somehow staying one step ahead of losing my credit card.
It's caring enough and not caring too much that defines the kind of instrument that I think you make, to be honest.
Well, I appreciate
again,
that.
That sounds so awful. We say,
did
that come out okay?
I was actually literally just having this conversation with a friend who was talking to me about, there was not a clickbait, that's not the right word. There was an article about a builder whose work I really like, and this documentary on it and how expensive that particular instrument was. And like that part, I just, the artisanal, I don't know, art house collector mindset thing, I can't do it. It just grates my inner soul. And I refuse to take myself seriously about this thing. And I refuse to make the business be this thing of like, and again, this is probably, the conversation was, is that detrimental to my business? Should I be leaning into the collectible art house, this is the creme de la creme thing, or do I just keep showing up and making dumb jokes about ourselves and focus on doing what we can to make the thing better? And that's always been our mindset of we don't think of ourselves as artists about it. I don't, I'm not into that element of the business. I just want to show up and have fun and make good guitars and hopefully not be quite as broke as the year before and just kind of keep,
incremental
find ways to pay bills.
Yeah.
And that's, whatever money we make sinks right back into the business in terms of making it better. And that's the whole goal.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I would certainly choose option B of those two things for you. It's, I often awaken a response in two extremes with people. Every once in a while, I kind of annually-ish. It's not religious, but once a year or once every 2 years, I try and actually look honestly at my own work and my own business. And I love whiteboards. I have big whiteboards, in my offices, and I'll write out these things, and I'll just try and just really open mind about things I'm doing well, things I'm not doing well. And one of the things I did the last time I did that is I wrote, brings out the best in people. And right underneath it, I went, brings out the worst in people. Because I'm kind of a divining rod, it's just, and the other part that I get is that I get two extremes from people. Sometimes I get people talking to me for the first time when I've contacted them because I've seen an Instagram post, that's an interesting guitar, I want to know more about that, I want to talk to them. So I'll make a little Zoom call and we'll talk about it. And often they'll go, oh, you're way more down to earth than I thought you would be. And then I get responses on interviews I've done, like, that's the most pretentious fucker I've ever heard talk about a guitar. It's
maybe just a mirror to who you're talking to, right?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But my point in saying that is, hang on, let's wrap that up. My point in saying that is that because often these unique world-class instruments that I'm involved with, that in my mind, a boutique guitar is defined by an uncompromised vision. But so often that ends up being expensive that people just think I'm about expensive guitars.
Right.
And so actually I'm about authentic guitars, about authentic guitars that are contributing something to the conversation. And so, your guitars are authentic guitars that are contributing something to the conversation with an uncompromised vision as to what you're doing.
Yep.
And so that's why you fit so well with what we're doing. And it also looks great on my CV as the not pretentious category. Thanks, Doug.
Yep. Hey, someone's got to skew the average, right? I'll make sure the curve is skewed correctly.
Yeah. So you were just saying
it's funny,
we had a conversation.
Yeah, it was showcased a few years ago when Randy Parsons, right? Randy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he and I were neighbors, and I remember going into that, and it was that same. I'm like, this guy is either going to be the worst, just unbearable, antithesis to me, just everything I hate about this, or the absolute best. I don't, and I was like kind of worried to meet him, and then he was the best. He was great, and it was very much like it just, given what he builds and his clientele, and like stuff I look at and go, I don't have a life. That's a lifetime for me to do that. There's no way I would do that, and I'm like, oh, he's going to be so unbearable. And he was just so great and had the same sense of humor and same kind of general vibe of like, hey, man, I'm just making what I want to make and whatever. People like it. They don't like it.
Yes.
I'm going to put a cow skull in a guitar and that's going to work. And why not? I'm like, all right, this is my guy.
Yeah. I think he actually said he's sending something on tour with us this year with a coyote skull as the bracing inside it with a red light.
Yeah.
And you know, it's hilarious. I think he'd be okay with me sharing this. I remember, like, it wasn't the first year. It was like the second or third year he was in the Boutique Guitar Showcase at NAMM. And I check him, you know, as I do, I walk around, I check in on people, ask you how you doing, how things going. And he's like,
make fun of my shoes. Yep.
Yeah. He's like, Jamie, man, everybody here is so damn good. I do not belong here. It's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Everybody's got imposter syndrome, man. Yeah. Some of us earn it, but
no, you don't.
Yeah. Well, and that's the fun thing about the showcase, especially, is like it should be that collection of I do this thing and I don't know how you do that thing.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps it fun.
Yeah.
Or I know how you do that thing, and I would never want to do that in a million years because that seems like way too much work, or whatever it is, or combination of, and that's how we all end up feeling that way. You know, I look at that, and sometimes, you know, the price reflects that, and sometimes I think the price wildly is below what reflects that for people, and that's a whole other conversation. And, you know, and the same thing with like that article about that guitar. I'm like, well, you know, the other thing you got to remember too is, the math only works one way. If this is your full-time job and you only build X amount of guitars per year, and people are willing to pay Y, that kind of dictates Z. You know, it's not the cost of living and the cost of doing it is going to dictate what you got to charge, or whether or not you can get it's a different story. You know, we are geared a certain way towards a certain amount of volume to generate a certain amount of income that allows us to do this and keep our price at what I would like it to be at. That seems to be reflective of what people are willing to pay for it. And sometimes making that jump from, you know, price A to price B, which would probably, I know, intrinsically maybe move a few more guitars or maybe a few less, but we'd have more in our pocket at the end of the day. You know, sometimes it's hard to make that jump. And sometimes there are people I walk around and go, man, that's expensive. And yeah, it's not my thing. So I don't know, maybe I'm not a fair judge of that. And there's definitely people I walk around and go, boy, I don't know how you're making it work on that price for the amount of time that it goes in. Like, I can, you know, you can see it and you go, you should be charging a lot more for that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the balance. And, you know, we judge all guitars based on this sort of market, but we don't all live in the same place. Right? The cost of living is so very different. So I won't name the guitar maker, but as I'm traveling around the world and meeting with people, I remember sitting for lunch. I can't even name the country because it would identify who it was, but I was somewhere having lunch. And I was
somewhere above or below the equator.
And you know, the guitar maker and their wife was saying that you know, cost of living is out of control here. Like, really? Like, do you have an example for me? I said, yeah, like university education now, it's gotten way out of control. I said, how much is it? I said, like, to go to university here now, it costs $1,000 a year.
I'm in the wrong country, bro. As someone who's got 2 kids we're currently thinking about this with.
right? Any American gets into hysterics like you right now, right?
Yeah.
But if you raise the price of tuition just a little bit in France, they take to the streets and they protest.
Oh,
They're
right? Say what you want about the French, but they know how to protest.
They know how to protest. They're excellent at it.
They do it really well.
It's like tailgating for them. It's just like it's just a party. It's the thing they do on the weekends. They go and what are we protesting this week, guys? And
throw a dart, man. Yeah. We'll pick one.
Have I ever told you about some of our French protest experience? So on tour, I don't remember what year it was. A number of years back, we're in Europe, and we had we woke up in France, and we're not paying attention to the news and shit while we're on tour, because we're going from country to country, right? And we have a schedule to keep. You're just going. Sure. Anyways, we start driving. We have to be in Italy for the show the next day, and so we're driving through France. And we keep getting stopped in these little towns. These people, it was called the Yellow Jacket protest, and they shut down the entire country. And Yellow Jacket basically is blue collar. So if you work a blue collar kind of job in America, you wear a yellow high vis vest, and so we're waiting to get through. Like there's traffic circles all over the place instead of stop signs and lights in most European places, and so it's slow and slow and slow. And we get up to our turn, and someone comes towards us in a yellow jacket. We rent the motorhomes that we use for tour out of the Czech Republic. They deliver them to whatever airport we want. So we check plates. They're looking at us like, what do you? They don't see a lot of Czech plates around. What are you doing here? I roll the window, say I'm Canadian. They're like, Canadian. And next thing you know, they call someone over, and they've got a bottle of wine. They're like, you've got a motorhome. Do you have a bottle opener in there? Yes. Okay. so we uncork the bottle of wine for them, and then they want to share. I'm in the driver's seat. They're pouring me a glass of wine, right? Like I take a sip and hand it to my crew. They put the wine down, and it wasn't the only time that happened that day. We protest after protest. We got to another place, and they gave us some pastis, which I'd never had before. It looks like water until it's poured out. Then all of a sudden, it looks like milk. It's this magical thing that happens.
Sure.
And in the driver's seat again, they stopped us. They had us. They had us sign. They wanted to sign a petition. We're like, we're not French. They're like,
doesn't matter.
Sign anyways. I think I signed like Gene Simmons or something, my whole crew decided it doesn't matter. We just need signatures. No one's going to check. It's all right, And by the time we made it,
showing how strong a petition is.
Yeah. By the time we made it down to the Italian border, we're at Mont Blanc or Monte Bianco on the Italian side, and now it's really stopped. Things are going up, and we have our videographer. You might remember Dave traveling with us, and we have a drone that we use to do our intros and outros. And so we throw the drone up to see if we can find a pass, and we're watching on the screen, and those are riot police. We're watching the riot police move in, and they're shooting like tear gas past, and a tear gas can comes whipping right past the drone, almost knocked it out of the air. We eventually made it up and around the protest, and we did make it to our event on the next day, but we don't share those things in real time with people. They have no idea what we go through to get those guitars around on tour.
God bless the French, man. They really know how to do it.
Yeah. It's fantastic. But, it's that, back to the way your sort of guitars are and stuff, honestly, I think it's because, growing up as a rocker, growing up with that sort of rock and roll and fuck you attitude is part of what helps me get around the world through those situations. It really does, right? and that attitude towards those things, carrying that forth. And I know that you play, and I know that you and your wife Teresa were actively playing. I don't know if you guys are still playing at this point in time or not, but
not as much as we would like to. The kids kind of sucked all the free time out of that right now, but actually that's a combination. That's a half truth. We did meet. I actually knew her brother and her parents before I really knew Teresa. Her brother is a couple years older than me, so we had classes together in high school, and then overlapped a bit. And her parents had like the local band, basically in the town that we grew up in, and so weirdly, her parents are both teachers, and the guy that played saxophone in both the high school band and our little band that we had together. It's like, oh, my old teacher has a home studio, and he records people from time to time, and so we recorded in there. And I hadn't quite met Teresa at that point yet. We're same age, but we just, for whatever reasons, our circles didn't quite overlap at the time. And then we started dating and met like right around my senior year, and she started singing in our band because we had an instrumental band because nobody could sing. And then we always joked that she Yoko'd the band. The reality is we all went our separate ways for college, and just, Teresa and I happened to go the same direction. And she's been stuck with me for 24 odd years almost now. And so, but yeah, we did that. And then, we played with her parents and her parents' band. And then and her brother's unbelievably musical. He's that annoying guy who can just pick anything up instantly. And he played in bands and toured Europe for a little while, and get to do that kind of level of stuff. And then got like the rest of us, a real job eventually. And
hate those guys.
But mostly it's just, we're kind of in this in-between state between the kids and like Teresa's dad, my father-in-law, he's getting up there in age, and arthritis is making it really tough to play. And so it's just become, we always steal all the band equipment for Cower Fest. And so I literally just finally took it all back over there Sunday. And I was just watching the band room starting to collect with my mother-in-law's stuff. And I'm like, this is a problem. This is stealing the fate of not really getting to play too much anymore, or at least in the band format. And so I don't play as much because I'm not primarily on the assembly end. I'm primarily still in paint as my day-to-day job besides running the business. And so even on the new stuff, I don't play it that often. When it's a new model or something we're working on, or real excited about maybe for that. As much as it kind of kills my soul to say this, I've been getting more playtime in the last year and a half because I ended up with a neural DSP from my buddy's one of the sales reps there. Ryan. And so we had it at Cower Fest last year. Ryan.
Little props to Ryan.
Yeah.
Good job over at neural DSP, Ryan.
Yeah, and so it's become that thing of like, because the kid time has eaten up the available daylight hours, it's been allowing me at least get some playtime in after hours, after they're in bed and stuff. And so that's been actually really nice. And it's a cool unit. And it's still like a cranked amp more, but headphone rig beats nothing at all, I guess. So, and there's also the element of, I think most of my guitar playing these days is in that like 10 minutes of trying not to yell at the kids about putting their shoes on and brushing their teeth, waiting for them to get in the car. It's like, I'll just sit and noodle right there. And
you make your kids wear shoes when they brush their teeth?
Oh my God.
That's so weird, Doug.
Don't get me started. I know. It's just real dirty commie of me to expect them to not stink at all times. Just horrible. They're monsters. Yeah, that's my anger management level system right now. Of like, I'm just gonna sit here and I'm just gonna angrily strum and noodle while I wait for them because we're already 20 minutes late. What's 10 more minutes?
That's the root of rock music right there, man.
It's actually working out pretty good. My youngest though, Lucy, she's 9. I feel bad we haven't been really doing what we should be here. If you show her something on piano, she picks it up right away. Picks up song lyrics immediately, has a good voice, mostly does dance right now, but she's kind of to the point now, she's 9, she's like, Dad, I think I'm ready to trade a dance class for maybe School of Rock and learning to play guitar. And I'm like, you should ask your grandpa to teach you, because don't learn from me. I just learn by ear and don't know what the hell I'm doing. But like, I was like, yeah, we could do that. Like, my oldest is hopeless. He doesn't care about it too much at all, and that's fine. It's whatever. I think they're going to come to NAMM this year, though. I think we're going to. I think they're gonna fly down Friday night, hopefully, and because she really wants to go see stuff and
great
bang around on things, and so Teresa and the kids will come down, and general nuisances, I think,
wonderful
of the show, which will be perfect.
The whole Cower family, great. First family photos at NAMM, perfect.
It would be, yeah. We always joke. Never mind, I'm not gonna get into that. That's a whole other that's maybe too personal for the podcast. We joke that Max is a NAM baby. Max may or may not. The timing might correlate to a January-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. That can happen. That can happen.
In that wonderful window where I can't remember what the hotel was before it, but there was one of the hotels was briefly Hotel Menage, and so I'm like, oh my god, that's the most NAM baby story ever at the Hotel Menage. Yay.
Wonderful. She'll be glad you said that.
Yes, I'm sure. Everybody listening is getting so much insight to the guitar industry right now.
There's lots of people who have that. I think is it Ron Howard that named all his children after where they were conceived?
The cities, yeah.
It's Bryce Dallas Howard is one child who's a successful actor at this point in time. She played Elton John's mother. She was in the Twilight series. She's done a whole bunch of different stuff, and she's been she produced one of the Star Wars episodes. Also, I think
so. Yeah,
Boba Fett episodes.
Jurassic Park movies, the newer ones. And,
yeah.
Oh yeah,
she's great. And that Dallas part is because that's where.
It's better than naming one kid after a Simpsons joke and the other one after realizing after the fact that Lucifer probably should have been her actual name and not Lucy. And
Lucifer? So you call it Lucifer?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Every once in a while. She loves that name. It's definitely not a thing.
Wonderful.
Doesn't take teasing very well.
You're one of the people I think about when I think about The Simpsons. Actually, in an interview I did this morning, the one that started in Shanghai, we were talking. We were talking about form factor and design, and I was making the argument that people aren't copying the iPhone. It just is the thing that makes sense with cell phones.
Yeah.
And so everything looked like the iPhone because they were the first ones to say, we don't need to figure out how big the screen is versus the size of the buttons. Just make the buttons on the touch screen. And everyone went,
take a BlackBerry and combine it with an iPod.
Right. And so everything in the world since then looks like an iPhone. And he was referencing, he came back to me and said, well, you can't just follow consumer demand or you end up with the Homer car. And and I thought right away about you.
Yep. It's true, man. I always tell people, when people are, I don't know, people still dumbly come to me for advice. That sounds conceited to say it that way, but I mean, but I'm like, there's basically three paths. You can make Fenders and Strats and Les Pauls, and in the short run, you'll be successful at it. And in the long run, the next guy will come eat your lunch, and that'll be it. Mm-hmm. You can make your own work and survive, but you got to be willing to make it to the long run, because it's real hard in the short run to do that. Mm-hmm. And or some combination, a little bit of both. And we kind of maybe we're a little bit more on our own thing, or at least the stuff that we made that kind of started with was making a twist on something known or an off the beaten path version of that guitar. Mm-hmm. But the third version is you can listen to the internet, and that's the worst way to go, because you're either going to make a Telecaster or you're going to make the Homer. It's one or the other. It's a real easy path to go down and end up doing that. And I think for me, thankfully, not knowing any better maybe, or being lazy, has kept me from fully making the Homer. And maybe not knowing when I got into this that there was a boutique market or that whole thing. I just made something because I had a machine that I could cut stuff out on, and I thought that'd be fun. And I was, that was one of the things with Grippin last year when we were designing it. I was like, okay, what is the 15 years of mistakes that I've been stuck with? Like, I don't want to make on this guitar in terms of like how we make it or what the options are or how we do the output jack, just little dumb things that, I kind of got committed on and then I'm stuck with it. I'm like, God, that was a pain in the ass. I wish I could go back and not do it that way anymore. And really try to go from that perspective. And that was challenging. Like, it was difficult to, because it can become very quickly that thing of like, oh, I made that choice back then because that was different, or I liked it, and it wasn't necessarily like, oh, how do I repeat this 150 times a year? I was only thinking about it from the perspective of like, oh, I'm just making one of these things. And, we're kind of going through that with this. We're doing a base version of Griffin now called Draken. And I honestly, I don't ever expect to sell more than 10 of these things. Bases are just something we do from time to time because we can, and people think it's something that we should sell a lot of, and no one ever buys them. But it was a project with Diego, who does a lot of the wood and CNC programming and stuff, or has taken over that for me. And I was like, hey man, if you want to make this thing happen, I have it drawn, but I am not willing to make this thing unless you go through all of the effort to make this repeatably buildable. So it's got to be able to carve the neck on the CNC the same way we carve any other neck. We got to be able to do the fixtures. It can't be if we need a 3D printed drilling fixture, when I say we, if he needs a 3D print, because I don't know how to do that. But that ground wire jig or that wire connector, you got to make sure this thing will reach A to B before we commit on it. Because I have definitely designed things and then gone, oh shit, how the hell do I get this to this? And try to figure that out. And having a freehand drill and hope you're not coming out the wrong spot or the back of the guitar or whatever. Like, if you're willing to put all that effort in, we'll make it. And then I don't mind doing it. But if I have to make a one-off thing or carve each one of these like it's the only one I'm ever going to do, I've lost that willingness a little bit to do that. Versus 15, 20 years ago when I was maybe willing to do something on a totally one-off weird basis. And that's maybe not the best attitude to have in terms of creativity, but it's the best attitude to have, I think, in terms of making, again, that same thing of like, okay, these are the lessons I've learned. And I know that if I do that, even if I treat it as a one-off, it's never quite as good as the fifth one of these that I have dialed the process in. And so I'm still willing to eat those first 3 or 4 things and make the little tweaks and make, whatever it is here that doesn't translate from the screen to real life until we get to where we want it. But I'm not going to I'm not even willing to go through those first 5 if we can't make it so that the next 100 is that thing over and over again. That quality part that we can control is there. And so, that's worked out really well. I have a friend who always sums it up best. It's like, you got to be dumb enough to start and stubborn enough to stick with it. And that's kind of this. I think we're in the stubborn stage still a little bit now. Hopefully not as much in the dumb stage.
Yeah. Do I know that friend?
He's a car buddy, so probably not. But it's definitely an expression I've stolen and used a lot of times.
Yeah. It sounds suspiciously of a Sullyism also.
Yeah. It's a little bit of the life that we both live. Or the mantra.
All right, so let's bring our audience into this just a little bit here, because you made a comment a second ago, like you had a machine, might as well use it. Why did you have a machine? I know, but the audience doesn't know.
Yeah.
Doug, let's bring them back into the origin story a bit here of Cower and how this came to happen, because most people didn't just have the machine sitting around.
So my dad's a cabinet maker. So I grew up, the running story is I have a brother, and every Saturday, every weekend, but mainly every summer vacation, especially, and Christmas break, it was, I don't care who goes where, but you can't stay home. And we can't be in the same place. I love my brother, but we're brothers. And so I would go to the shop almost every time, and my brother would go do whatever else, summer school or some other activity. And so I just grew up, and I like making stuff. Maybe because I grew up in my dad's business, and I grew up working on cars, and just, I've always been, I think it's really common in our business, obsessed with how things are made, or interested at least, how things how they're made. I like big equipment, trains, airplanes, whatever. I think it's all really fascinating and neat. And so I grew up doing that, and I made furniture and, whatever, and always enjoyed it and enjoyed the design element. And then in the late 90s, my dad was the first cabinet shop to have a CNC machine in the area. And I was coincidentally taking AutoCAD because it counted as a math class my senior year. And after taking pre-calculus, I knew I was done with math. That was the end of the road for me. And so it just kind of became my job to draw things in its CAD CAM software, which again, this is like 1999, 2000, pretty primitive. But it happened to be at the skill level that 1 year of AutoCAD gave me. And so I just started making stuff on there, and it kind of started simple. And it wasn't guitars at first. It was much later that kind of spark fired. It was 4 or 5 years into it. I was dating Teresa at the time, and this piece of maple came in the shop. It was really nice looking, and it was just, in a pile of maple that Dad had ordered for whatever, making crown molding or trim or something. And I kind of mentioned offhand to her and around my future father-in-law, I was like, I kind of I should build a guitar out of this. I bet I could do that. And it was weird because for all the things that I've built and worked on and been obsessed with, the guitar seemed like this weird, mythical, someone ran up to the mountaintop and brought it back down. It didn't seem like it was just made in a shop like my shop. And maybe some of that is, because I think growing up when I grew up, and this right before kind of YouTube, and maybe you got to see videos of Fender when it was a shop that looked like my shop, or whatever. I'm just, in my mind, it was always this big, mass-produced, massive, this has got to be what you need to do all this stuff. And I didn't know it didn't need any of that. And so I mentioned that offhand to Teresa, and for my birthday, a bunch of parts showed up, and my father-in-law, kind of unbeknownst to me, like I knew he knew some of this stuff, but I didn't realize he had done kind of light duty repair work in the 70s when he was going through college. He worked at the music store across the street from the college, and so he knew fretwork and wiring, and and I knew wiring from cars, but it's a different kind of a different thing for guitars, but like I could solder and do all that, but like mostly fretwork and some of that element of the more guitar specific, non necessarily wood shaping part of it. And so I just kind of took a stab at it. And so the first thing I ever did was like a PRS-y type thing. And because the software was so archaic, and there's just so much less digital information available in that era than there is now. I literally took a picture of a PRS and I think I can't remember if I did it in MS Paint, but I basically printed it to transparency paper and then stuck it to the monitor and traced it out in the CAD CAM software and then kind of went from there to get the shape right. And because that's the one thing, I cannot draw by hand. I am awful at it. I can draw cabinets and things with straight lines real well, because that was what I was good, pretty much the extent of it. But kind of organic-y, curvy things are tough. And once I kind of did that and kind of started getting a sense of scale, and I had a good eye for it, I just needed the right way of being able to capitalize on the intrinsic. I think I have a good eye for it. I have an eye for what designs my stuff, obviously. And you can see that in that. And so it just became that kind of that evolution, and I made that first guitar on the CNC, which it becomes a thing that starts to fall into that classic trap of CNCs do all the work. It cut the thing out, and I did the rest. And even then, it didn't do a very good job because I wasn't good at programming it, and I was learning a lot of lessons. And so I made that, and that I bought a neck for it. So and then it kind of evolved from, okay, here's what I learned on this one. I want to try again, and then I want to try again, and then some of that was, I was making tellies and strats, because that was kind of the next natural evolution of how to do stuff on there with the skill set that I had available, which is pretty much 2D AutoCAD, and kind of working my way up. And then I started making what became the Banshee, and that was the first things that I did, neck carbs on and full fretboards on, and really, and this machine ran on a proprietary computer that drove it, and or not the computer, but at least the interface was proprietary to that, and so you couldn't upgrade it. It was Windows 95, 16K of RAM, 386 processor in Italian, and that was what drove that machine. So it was very processor limited. So it didn't do complex 3D movement, didn't do neck carbs, didn't do that kind of thing very well. The machine itself physically could do it, but it would just run out of processing power. And so working within those limitations, and but also at the same time, because of how it was designed for doing cabinet work, it's what they call a pod rail setup. So instead of having a big flat table, it has vacuum pods and it allows you to run, parts at least through the bottom of what would be the table or the Z-axis. So like on a Banshee, the ability to have that headstock hanging below the table wasn't an issue versus if I learned on a different machine. Not that there isn't workarounds for that, but like I just kind of learned in a very specific way and had a 4-position tool changer and a drill head and a saw blade that I could kind of co-opt and make work, to do our front slotting and stuff like that. And it just kind of evolved from that process. And I think I'm kind of grateful because it was so archaic compared to what's available now. It really did force, how do I make this jig? How do I solve this issue? What's the trade-off here between machine time or ability versus handwork and ability? And it was a good, learning thing. And we had that machine, up until like 2021, I think we finally just could not keep it running any longer, 22-ish, right around there. We actually bought a new CNC that was basically the 20-year newer version of that machine. And of course, none of the programs would just walk over, had to basically start from scratch on everything.
Right.
And that was part of where Daylighter retired out. And the carb tops came out on the lineup because demand was some of it. And also some of it was, we didn't know if we could fit both machines at the shop at the same time. So I thought there was a real chance I'd have to get rid of one, get the new one up and running, learn the new one, start from scratch on everything, and have months potentially where I wasn't making guitars on either piece. And thankfully, we were able to rework the shop at the time to keep the old one going. And we had probably solidly like 3 or 4 years where they both were running. And we were able to kind of slowly shift over. And then, that just kind of evolved the business that way. And so I learned one of the things with the cabinet business, we never did our own finishing for the most part. We always subbed that out. So I didn't know how to spray or how finishing worked. And again, the same thing, kind of like the resources were there-ish, but not necessarily. So like there's a lot of resources for how to spray nitro and stuff, but I'm in California, and at a certain point very quickly I got capped out of like I'm not spraying in my backyard or my garage. I'm in an industrial area. Like I get inspections, and so I can only spray so much. And I was sharing the spray booth with the guy across the parking lot who does our cabinet, or at the time our cabinet finishing. And he was letting me come in after hours. And so then it just kind of slowly chipped away at, I would do like assembly at home, and I would do the woodwork here at the shop, and I'd be finishing over there. And then it kind of slowly moved over. And then in '08, when the recession or the .com bust or whatever the typical cycle we go through is,
the financial crisis, the mortgage crisis.
I think so. I think it was that one. It wiped out the cabinet business. There was no cabinet work to do. And so my parents' business dropped from like by 90%, like almost instantly. And so by that point, I had been doing Daylighter, and it just kind of segueing into maybe I wanted to do this full time. I was kind of doing it part time. And so I kind of took over half the rent for the shop and started being more serious about it. And that helped get my parents through it, and it helped me. I couldn't afford the whole shop. We have, at the time we had 9,000 feet. We dropped one unit down to 6,000 because we had kind of a third unit for storage and cabinets that were being staged. And that got us both through that. And then I don't remember if that's before or after the first NAMM that I walked. I want to say it was after. And so I think 2007 was the first NAMM that I walked, and I met Nick Huber. No, I take it back. It was 2008. Started 2008. I met Nick. I met Yuha, and I had a mutual friend that told me I should go introduce myself. And that was kind of that inkling of like learning there was an industry here. And then I did Montreal, where I think you and I met, that first Montreal that I did. And I walked into that show 6 months later, still working part-time for my dad and working after hours on guitars. And Nick Huber was like, I'm so glad you're here. I've been following you since we met, and I'm like, I'm just a random dude you met, out of 100,000 people that come through that show or whatever. And he was so sweet. Yuha was so sweet. And I just fell in love with the business. I fell in love with the people, that do this for a living, and then came home and quit my job and went full time at it. And, by that point, I think that was probably Daylighter's really low numbers, like in the first 20 or 30. And Banshee didn't exist as a model yet. Like it was something I had made before, but I was like, I don't want to make that thing. It's, it's not my thing totally. And, so that's it. I just fell in love with the people in the business and have been fortunate enough to be supported by it. And, I think we all have I've talked about it before, but like we all have the luthier suicide support line where when we're all, somehow we all manage to know when the other one needs a pickup phone call of just like, why are we doing this, man? It's usually pretty well timed, but
it can be challenging.
That's how I got into it. And so, and then it evolved into, eventually I bought the entire shop and business out. And my dad retired a few years ago and we managed to kind of keep each other symbiotically going when needed. And when we were both having good years, that was great. We put money back into the shop for equipment and, like I bought, like I bought the newer CNC and, so I ended up buying the whole place out and now I actually have an office and
all grown up.
And, yeah, it's pretty much. But it's funny because in that discussion of like, how you get into the business and the ways you can get into it and stuff, like some of the furniture background did show back up with me because we very early, when I was, even before it was really a business, I had to make something to put all these guitars on at home. And so we started making these kind of furniture-ish guitar stands or racks. And, it became this thing of like a few years back, or I kind of did it early on. I started making some of those to kind of help, where some guys do repair work or some people do finished subcontracting. That was kind of that thing of like, well, the machine outruns what I can handle pretty quickly in a week or in a month. And so maybe I should start selling these. And like the first iteration of it, the idea was there, but the execution wasn't in terms of production and business end of it. And then for a few years we didn't make them. And then we kind of brought it back out. And like by then I had the laser and we had some other issues that I wasn't happy with the original versions worked out. And that's, I have one full-time employee. That's his only job is to do rack production. And that really helps even out the ebbs and flows of guitar sales and the machine doesn't care. And that was that furniture making background showing back up of like, hey, what else can I make on this thing? What I need to solve this problem. And I got a big shop. I can throw a lot of resources at solving this problem. May not solve it well, but I can.
It's an asset. What are you doing with it? Actually, this podcast is exactly one of those things for us. A couple of years ago, I looked at the just everything we're doing and said, what could we do that's just kind of a little tweak to what we already do that wouldn't be a total new. And I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love doing new things and developing new business concepts and such. And so what could we do that's not so complicated that we've got a lot of it already in the bank? And part of it was, I'm not the selfie guy. I don't go out and have, we've had plenty of dinners together and conversations and drinks over the years in different places, but I don't know that there's any selfies of you and I with a beer in Berlin or Montreal or whatever. I've just never been that guy. But people ask and people want to be sort of that fly on the wall. And I thought I could allocate an hour or two every once in a while to give them a little bit of, we all know the guitar makers would probably benefit from it also. I don't want to live that where we're always on camera, but we can be on camera for a moment. Everyone probably appreciate that. And we're traveling anyways. So the problem that people creating content around the world would have is that's a big travel expense. But we're already doing the traveling. We're already doing the meeting up with people because of the Boutique Guitar Showcase tours and such. So, that's a simple add-on addition. And so for you, who's got a CNC machine sitting there that might not be running, you're like, it doesn't need to sleep.
Not making money.
It could just keep. It's not really a whole lot of extra resources to get a much bigger return on that all of a sudden.
Sure.
And that's a really interesting way to think about this. We're not in the segment of the business of guitar yet, but maybe we'll go there later on, where we do talk about that stuff.
It's been an interesting thing too. Like, not to jump ahead maybe here, but finding that balance, because when we're, not to necessarily pull the curtain back and ruin people's perception of this, but we live guitar sale to guitar sale a lot of times. And sometimes I got 12 months worth of work on the books, and sometimes I have 2 weeks, and so it becomes that thing of like, okay, trying to plan for that, and marshaling our resources accordingly, and also, but at the same time, when we're a year booked out, then it starts becoming like, ooh, man, I almost need 2 of these things, or we're competing. Like, do I need a swing shift? Like, because the racks eat up a pretty busy. They'll eat up 4 days a week on the machine easily if we let it. They'd run every day if we. I'm like, okay, how do I find the balance here? And because I apparently am phobic to having a savings account, as soon as we have some money and a bunch of sales on the books, I'm like, all right, what's the next piece of equipment? What's the next thing we're going to get? What's going to solve that issue? What can I buy now? And I'm single-handedly keeping the economy afloat, Jamie. That's my goal.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. Yeah, the ups and downs, keeping it going, being creative. I mean, that's what this is all about, finding solutions and the capacity for it. And here I'm going to get dangerously political for a second. There's a lot of the narrative right now about our environment, and there's this whole sort of feeling since the 1970s, there's too many people, we're going to go through a population destruction, too many humans on the earth, we need to reduce this. And I hear that a lot from people, actually. It's come up a number of times in this podcast. But actually, there's a number of economists who have looked at the scenario and went, we keep forgetting one thing. The more people on the planet, the more of us that are finding solutions. And actually, we're way past the point where they said we would implode. We're way past. And actually, the more humans are on the planet, actually we find more and more solutions. And even to the environmental issues. The Great Barrier Reef is coming back. There's greenification. NASA is showing pictures where the green is encroaching in on the desert. Because guess what? When there's a lot of carbon in the air, plants. That's what they're farming us, folks. We make their carbon and then we die and feed their roots. Yep. But the point is, just in our capacity for creation. It's the thing that defines our humanity.
More brains, the better, right?
Yeah, and that we do find solutions. We work on them. And so, that's that sort of ups and downs that you find. But the reason you continue to have ups is because you find solutions. You don't just sort of like, oh, shit, that's it. Nail in the coffin. I'm done. I give up.
It's funny. This literally happened in the last week. So one of my guys got a job offer that he can't refuse, and that's part of the business, and the kind of offer where I was like, ooh, do they need a second person? That's
a really good offer.
And it was tough. It was a day, had a bad day, and it wasn't unexpected. I knew that that was something that could happen or would happen, and that's just how it goes. And it's like I went home. And Andrew, he's my number one guy. He's been with me forever and ever and ever and ever. He's he's basically in charge here and we both kind of went home in bad moods. And it was also happened to be day before payroll comes out, and having to pull a rabbit out of my hat like always, and just went home in a bad mood. And then the next day came in, I was like, all right, how are we doing it? How are we going to make this work? Yeah. And I pulled the rabbit out of my hat and covered payroll and pulled the, restructured things in the shop. And that happens, we've had employees that we've had to let go, and we've had employees that we haven't wanted to let go. But, just again, moved on. And it's not, I don't ever, Andrew's maybe the exception to this rule. And Josh, who you met last year, who literally knows if he told me he was leaving, he would wake up the next day like he was in Saw 2 chained to the bench. He is not allowed to leave the shop. mostly everybody's not allowed to leave, but he especially. I'm not training another painter. Like, he's so good at it. But we've had those things where it's just go home so depressed. I don't know how I'm going to do this tomorrow. I don't know how I'm covering this bill. I don't know. I don't have a line of credit left. We're tapped right now. I don't know how to get from A to B. And then you just come in the next day and try to figure it out. And sometimes it's just the miracle sale that comes in overnight. And sometimes it's, the phone call you don't know what's happening happens. But a lot of times it's like, okay, well, if this is what's working, let's hit that, or let's focus on this other thing, or let's solve this problem by moving that piece of equipment over here, and then you can work over here, and it'll save you the time going back and forth across the shop, and we can make this work in the short run. And
that's
so
what you got to do. That's our creative capacity, man. That's just go on. I have that more often than I should probably admit. There's a Disney character in my head from Finding Nemo, the Dory character, the one with like the 3-second memory. Just keep swimming. Exactly. Yep. In my head, going through this, I'm like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And thankfully, I'm in a different spot. Like, if I lost the shop, I won't be homeless. Like, I live on Teresa's, we would be very, very, very tight, but we wouldn't be homeless. Yeah. And at the same time, we have the shop I'm looking historically at, I think, one of the things that kills people in this industry, and that's debt owned by other people or opened up to being owned by other things. And so, no one owns this place but me. I obviously I rent the space. Like, I have landlords, but they're amazing landlords, and we've been tenants for 26 years. Like, they are fantastic, and I have so I don't ever worry about that. We made a big effort last year, knowing that this year was probably going to be kind of a rough year, to make sure we had everything paid off. Like the newer CNC machine, its last payment rolled off last year. My line of credits got back to clear. All that stuff put the shop on its best footing, and like, I could go down to maybe me and one person and keep this place going. It would be bad in the long run from the intellectual loss and the institutional knowledge point of view, but I'm not going to be able to, generally, unless they double my rent, I can still squeak by on that. Like, we own the Plek outright. It's not being owned by anybody, or whether it's investors or the bank or whatever that is, that helps a lot. Like, it's really, I think that's the biggest death knell to sometimes the growth expansion thing I've watched. And, I'm not going to name names, but there are historical precedents, and I'm sure we all are thinking of somebody, and we might all be thinking of somebody different here, or multiple times. And even, you could look at Fender Gibson 60s, that whole thing. Ownership is generally not perceived, changes are not perceived well by our market base, and extra cooks in the kitchen don't help. It dilutes the product and stuff. And some companies do it well, but it very rarely does it seem to be, especially at our scale. It just ends up being a death knell. We've been approached a couple times by offers that were really lucrative or tempting, and it's real hard sometimes to walk away from that and go, man, that cedes more control over than I want to allow. Or to be honest, we live in an industry where it's a lot of false promises and or empty promises. And I've heard a lot. And I'm like, man, I might be missing the boat, and I might look back and regret this, but I just feel like I'm going to be more likely to regret saying yes. And I think so far I've come up 100 on that end, these offers that I've had. And it's not like they're not, but there's been a couple times, especially in moments where, boy, that would be a real game changer right now for us. But would it be a game changer 3 years from now for us? Or would I be regretting that? Right. And so, that's part of the thing. And that's, as much as I want to buy the next piece of equipment, or right now desperately need to buy a new forklift because ours is just it's living on Lucas stop leak at this point. It's just not
if I don't have the cash to do it outright, we're not buying it.
Yeah.
Like if I can't, we're not financing anything. We're not doing anything right now. That was we're at the point where the shop can run, and knock on wood, we have everything we need. There's nothing that would stop us from making stuff right now. Maybe stop us from growing to that next level. And that's only really determined on if we want to be at that next level, in terms of size and scope, and some of that's out of my control. So, just kind of.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of signs of wealth, and money is one of them. Being, your own boss is another one of them. Being in control of your own time.
Yeah.
Not having the debt.
Yeah.
All of those things are big signs of wealth and capacity. And being part of that
trying to be better
industry that you talked about. And being part of that industry that you talked about. I've talked to a lot of guitar makers who came in from somewhere else, and they're like, just the people in this part of it, the comrades. Yep. You talked about Nick Huber, and Nick and I worked very closely for a number of years together, and I remember he was in my summer NAMM booth because I was handling his sales for a number of years in America, and we'd both get busy talking to people, and then we'd come back to be a little lull. You know how it happens at a show. There's a slight lull. You get really busy, a slight lull. And every time there's a slight lull, we'd stand beside each other, and you go, I just met the coolest guy. Man, I really love that guy. Nick, like, oh yeah, cool. And then the next guy, Nick would be like, such a great guy. I really love that guy. And Nick is a Labrador. Everyone loves Nick. He's just such a sweetheart and
good-looking, tall German Fabio, Dave Garolio. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. But no, he's so. Oh my God, dude! Nick did the most Nick thing ever at the last NAMM show. We were talking. It was Nick, Isaac Jang, and I can't remember who else was there. He was just talking about, I was at this customer friend's place, and I saw one of your guitars there. I was so excited that he had one of your guitars. And Isaac was like, oh, who is it? Because I know Isaac is like, the rest of us, he doesn't have that many guitars out there. So there's odds are he's going to know or be, And he goes, oh, this is my friend, the Emir of Kuwait. And I'm like, oh my God, Nick. Isn't that the guy that's like the dude, right? Like in charge of Kuwait, the country? It's like, yeah. And I'm like,
he's the heir apparent. His parent is currently, but he's,
the most casual, like, oh yeah, just freaking Nick. It was so on point. It was, Isaac had that same response too, of just like, what? I'm like, oh yeah, that's. I get to do our version of that when we meet people that are random. People like, oh, what do you do for a living? Play guitars for a living. Oh, is anybody famous player stuff? And we'll run through the list and oh, that's really cool. I'm like, yes, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't apparently know anybody in the royal government. It might not have been Kuwait. I can't remember. I think it was Kuwait though. It was just one of those. Like,
it is
such a.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
You might have been standing there, to be honest, when he said that. I can't remember.
No. But him and I have talked about his trip there and a few things recently. So, anyways, but actually, honestly, Doug, that's the impetus of this podcast. So this podcast is called Life with Strings Attached. And every fourth guest is not a guitar maker at all.
Sure.
Because I get to do things and I get to meet people that I otherwise have no business interacting with.
Yep.
I've interviewed the producer of Fight Club. I've interviewed the aerospace engineer of Lamborghini.
Sure.
I was just this morning, my guest from Shanghai who brought up The Simpsons is a graphic artist who's done every Hobbit movie. He did Deadpool. He did Wolverine. He did the Avengers. Cocaine Bear. He's done. He's done everything. But I met him because of my life in guitar, but also, the world's foremost blue whale researcher and so on and so forth. It's because of, I really think guitar is an icon of contemporary culture and what's happening there.
Yep.
That it gets us into places that you think that why is guitar guy here, but we were invited. We got to see at the table.
On the head there. That is the thing that is so surprising about this to me. And I guess it shouldn't be because guitar is such a worldwide whatever. It's kind of like almost everybody either plays guitar or needed cabinets. And so I always needed, when my HVAC went out at home, I could horse trade away for whatever, and that kind of thing. And it's wild, the people, the town that we're in, so we always say Sacramento because we get tired of explaining where Elk Grove, the specific town we live in, or the shop is in, it's just a suburb south of Sacramento. And it's not Vegas or Nashville or New York or, Los Angeles, Hollywood, honestly, any of the 20 towns in Southern California that you could name, San Diego. And it's not the big music stopover town. Or music town. We have, at least now, we have kind of every venue size, so we're starting to get more. And there's still there's bands that are from here. I mean, Deftones and Tesla and other bands like that. So it's not nothing, but the amount of people I've met, I always describe this in the best way. So when Max turned 5, on his 5th birthday, he had his first concert festival. Backstage and artists hang out was Flogging Molly, and we were hanging out with Dennis and dropping something off. And then the next day we went to the air show that happened to be coming through town at the time, and he got to go hang out in the VIP section with the Thunderbirds because one of the crew chiefs plays guitar and followed us on Instagram, and and it was just, again, these weird connections of people I meet, and some of that, social media has made that an incredible thing, and some of it's just good old fashioned. You meet them at a show or at NAMM or whatever random thing, and it's crazy. We had a customer order that came in, I don't know, about a month and a half ago. And Kaya, who does a lot of the administrative and ordering and logistics and all that, called to just confirm a couple things and, put the order in our system. And the customer was like, hey, I'm Larry David's tour manager for his thing. If Doug wants to come out, let me know. And it was so funny because the day before, Teresa was like, should we go see Larry David? I'm like, it's Monday night in San Francisco. I'm like, that's 2 hours each way or 90 minutes each way. I'd love to, and then this thing happened. I was like, well, now we have to go. That's a no-brainer. It's just weird how that thing kind of happens over and over again. And I think also having the reputation of not being an asshole helps with that.
Right. I wouldn't know.
Kind of, yeah. I think. I'm sure a few people don't like me. But, we've fired the occasional customer around. I'm out, dude. This is I'm not. We're good. My life's too short. And I don't need this level of stress. But it's we generally have a help out people, and I've kind of thought about, it's a different note, but it's maybe my little pet peeve right now. I've really thought about on both websites, but especially on the Rack website. There's 7 people here between both businesses. We all work our butts off. And generally we bat close to 1,000, I hope, but stuff gets damaged, stuff gets, or we miss something or whatever. And sometimes we'll get people that come in so hot on an email, and I'm like, I know that you don't know this person, the person's sending me this email, but I've never left anyone hanging on anything. And I had a lot of times, I've had stuff that's come in for repair, and I even feel guilty charging for that. Sometimes, because I just want people to be happy. But if you come in, I feel like writing on the website, if you come in hot on an email, we're not going to help you. That's the new policy. We will help you. We will bend over. We will move mountains and whatever we need to do to help you. If you don't come in with the attitude, we had a couple racks that went out.
Helping reasonable people since 2007.
That's what it should be. That should be the slogan. Especially
Yeah.
we had, some racks, especially this time of year, they get thrown around by UPS, and it's just unavoidable. And I was like, okay, man, it's no sweat. We got you covered. Oh, I didn't think. Thank you so much for getting back to me so quickly. I'm like, yeah, dude, we're not Amazon. It's not a chat bot. You're going to call the shop and you're going to talk to one of two people here.
Right. Yeah.
My pet peeve.
Yeah, well, the negative stuff really hangs with us, So I had someone sort of make a rant based on one of the podcast episodes on, just made a comment on YouTube, just made a rant on it, and I had been in a bunch of meetings for the last week or so, just, NAMM prep and stuff going on. And almost everyone I spoke to was like, hey, I've been really enjoying the podcast, blah, blah. It's great to hear other guitar makers who are going through the same thing I am, blah, blah, blah. Thanks for doing it. And then one person tears a strip off you. And Tuesday morning, Roberta and I have this habit, where we get up and I bring espresso back to bed. We sit in bed and drink our coffee, And she was like, honey, I'm sorry you've been having a rough week. I'm like, Roberta, it's Tuesday morning. That week was yesterday. I said, because it completely derails you, right? Like, it's just like, it doesn't matter how many good things someone says. You get one person who comes in way too hot, like what you're talking about. You're like, holy shit, man! It's a guitar stand. There's no guitar emergencies. Like, just calm down. Tranquilo. We'll get there.
I can't remember who Conan was talking to. It was one of Conan's podcasts lately. And it was like, you never remember the compliments as much as you remember the insult. And it's tough. And it's really that same boat, man. Like, we've had guitars. That is the frustrating part about this. And we've had guitars that I thought was the best thing we'd ever made, or worse. The thing that I'm a little nervous about, like I always call it like the Hippocratic Oath of guitar building, right? There's a certain point where I don't think I can make this thing better without potentially making it much worse. And at a certain point in the day,
do no harm.
I have to just, do no harm first. And that, like I could try to make this one spot slightly better, but if I mess it up, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to, it's going to completely undo months or weeks or whatever, or start over, know? And so sometimes we'll send stuff out and I'm hyper worried about that one detail that I just wish was a little better. And then I'll get the angry email about something that I'm like, that's the thing you're complaining about? Like that? Okay. Yeah, and not that so it makes it sound like we're improved. There's been a couple times that things have gone out the door that didn't, whatever, one step didn't get caught right, or, and that's really made me mad because it's embarrassing to me when we legitimately had, a thing that was going on. I'm fighting one guitar that's come back a couple times now because it keeps developing a little pinhole where the veneer and the headstock meet on a band sheet. And I'm like, when it left here, I fixed it. And then the first time it was fine, and then I fixed it. It didn't have an issue, and then I kind of have a feeling it's maybe a little bit of temperatures causing this thing to expand and contract a little bit. Yeah. And and then it showed up. I was like, oh, hey man, no sweat, we'll get it fixed. And then the mistake I made was not showing that I had fixed it. We just got it done and sent it back out, and then it reappeared again, and it's here for the third time. And when it happened the second time, I called. I'm like, I had to be honest. I don't know what's doing that. I don't know. I won't. We're not going to lose. I don't like to lose. We'll get it squared away. It just may be the kind of thing. It may be here a little bit. Yeah. Because I may end up having to do something a little bit beyond than just a little, tiny drop fill or something. And then I want to let it sit, because if it's going to do it again, I don't want to ship it. Yeah. From a business perspective, every time I ship that thing round trip, that's a couple $100, and we don't make a ton of money on these things, and that's obliterating what little bit we did make on it. Yeah. And the second side of it is, every time we ship it round trip, that's 2 more chances for UPS or whoever to do what they do best. Yeah. And thankfully, this one's in a flight case anyway. So
yeah. Can I share one of our funniest? Oh, maybe I'm getting shit for this.
No,
I'm doing. I want to share one of our funniest guitar moments, because it involved you and shipping damage.
Sure.
And I don't know if you remember this, but we did a summer NAMM.
I'm sure I do.
And we did a summer NAMM show, and you shipped in guitars, and everything looked fine. And Roberta, my wife, had a clip-on headstock tuner. It's noisy. Everyone's setting up. You can't really hear the guitar, so you really need the clip-on tuner to see what's going on.
Yep.
And she's tuning, and the note's not really changing. But she's like, this is working. This is where she's tuning it. And then she's like, eventually she looks and realizes the headstock is coming at her as she raises the string tension. And she's like, oh my God, I broke his guitar. Yeah. Like, whoa, you didn't break it. But she was, it was hanging on by the ebony like overlay, you know, or I don't remember if there's ebony, but I think there was a peg head veneer on it, and it was just hanging on by the peg head veneer because the mahogany headstock had snapped in shipping. The
funny thing about
she really thought she had done it. So no, you can't break a guitar tuning. It's not your fault. Something else has happened.
We do, yeah. We can come back to that, but yeah, that one.
No,
that one actually,
the string should definitely break before the guitar neck.
Right,
that definitely happened somewhere else.
I would think so at least, but no, that guitar actually. It's funny. It was a customer order, and oh my God, just talk about the jinx of the guitar. Customer order, and I'm trying what the deal was with this thing here. Okay, the first one we did for him was a Banshee and a Sunburst, like a traditional Sunburst. And for whatever reason, we sprayed it. It was all done. We finished it. We assembled it. He paid his bill. We're outside taking some photos of it. And it's out in the sun, and it looks dusty, and I go to wipe the dust off, and it won't wipe off. And I realized what had happened is we were sharing with another builder at the time, the shops he was subletting from us, and I think he ran something metallic through my clear coat only gun. And we just put the most perfectly even dusting of gold top powder across this whole guitar. Like I couldn't replicate it if I tried. It was so perfect. But you couldn't see it. I literally could not see it until it was out in the sun.
Yeah.
And so I called the customer. I'm like, oh my God, man. He's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. I was like, I'll just build you a new one. I'm not going to strip it. Banshees are miserable to strip. It'll be cool. Whatever. I'll sell it. I'll just build a new one. So then he changed the finish on the second one to this kind of green burst. And so we got it done. We shipped it out, and FedEx broke it. I was like, this poor guy. So we built a third one. That one came back, and I ended up it broke it looked like a gun safe had come down the chute right after it. Like the box was accordioned 4 inches shorter, and it just drove the headstock up like a wedge right through the head, peeled the fretboard and neck open.
Right.
And it's because there was a scarf joint on that model. So I pulled it back, glued it all back into place, and I just kept it. I was like, I'll build you a new one, and I'll keep this one because it was a really cool one. That was the one I shipped you. So the fact that it broke a second time is more indicative of my lack of repairability. I just squirted it full of glue. I was like, man, we'll see what happens, and I probably should have splined it or something. And then, actually, they're no longer my insurance company, so I can openly admit this. I got paid 3 times on that guitar. I got paid for the first one. Then I got paid for the green one that went and got broken by the insurance company. And then it was 2 years later, and it's when I shipped it to you guys, and it got broken again. So I got paid again. I was like, I guess I came out okay on this thing. And then they dropped me. So that's fine.
I wonder
apparently why. Can't make more than one claim every 5 years.
Jesus.
Whatever. That's a whole other argument here.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, it's that's that thing, man. It's the business. That's my biggest thing is they never break the one that you could easily replace. By the way, it's always that one that has the one-off finish or the one-off top or the one. Can't you break a black one that we ship 20 of a year and I can go make another one and paint it black? That's not a big deal, but no, break the Koa top one. Cool. Right. Thanks guys. Yeah. Yeah. I will say we do have a joke in the shop. I always want to make a WWF style championship belt.
Yeah.
Right. But it's the I screwed up in an entirely new way award in the shop. And tuning, if you could break a headstock by tuning the guitar up, that would be a contender for the award. Josh one time put one in the UV booth and didn't quite get dropped onto the hanger correctly. And it was leaning out just far enough to jam the headstock under the UV lamp and exploded it in the booth. It sounded like a bomb went off and just utterly like bent the hanger and all the work and sheared the thing off. And I was like, you get the belt, man. That's a whole, like, I can't even be mad about that. That was a whole new way of screwing up that is unbelievably impressive. Like it's probably not the best as a boss, but I'm like, here's the deal, man. Like whenever I have to hire somebody, I'm like, you're never going to get fired for making a mistake. Like you're going to get fired if you make the same mistake potentially. And you're going to get fired if you don't own that you made that mistake. And you're not going to get very many past me because I've made all of them, or at least 95%, because every once in a while somebody new gets the belt.
Which means I'm very familiar with mistakes. I know exactly what they look like.
It's the same thing that every parent's ever told their kids. Like, I'm not an idiot, man. I'm not born yesterday. I know when you're trying to sugarcoat this or lie to me here. And the trick is to just not make that mistake again, or solve the problem. But every once in a while, you'll just find some new glorious way of doing something, and I'm like, I can't even be mad.
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive.
I love that. You know, actually, that came up recently in another conversation where we need to fail more, and we need to be okay with failure. And it's a problem that, in the digital realm that we live with, this the Command Z, you can undo everything, but there's no room for that in the physical realm. When you're making a guitar, you'll know there's truth in that, man. That's right there. It worked, it didn't work, and that it's really important. We talk a lot about anxiety these days. We talk a lot about people feeling unsafe. But anxiety is just not knowing. And the only way you know that you'll be okay is to gain competencies. You build your competencies so you're not unsure as to what the outcome will be. And hiding from it is never the solution, actually. It's controlled exposure. So make the little mistakes, have the conversation, realize you're not fired, Try again, make an adjustment, own it. This is how actually you gain competencies and confidence, and how you just simply get better. The only reason that you can do what you do today as well as you can do is because you learned every time you fucked it up and you tried it again, as opposed to stopping.
That's the crux of it. Like this is a little convoluted way of getting to it, but it's that same crux of like, when I was talking about designing Griffin, right? And not trying to make mistakes that I made in the past, but not knowing better is a blessing in its own way. It can unlock the ability to be more creative in some regards, or at least less hemmed in. Like, and now sometimes it's like my boundaries that I've hemmed us into is because we're not in that same phase of the business, or I'm not willing to do the thing. Some of it's life lessons and experience and institutional experience in the shop now. And some of it's like, okay, if we do this thing that way, how do I deal with it 2 years from now? Or how do I deal with it if you're no longer here and I have to train somebody else that? But like, I look back and go, if I knew what I know now when I first started doing this, first of all, I'm not even sure I would have gone down this path. I probably would have been much smarter to get a real job with a retirement plan. But there is a lot of liberty. And even like when I was building cars, back when I had the time and extra income to do that kind of stuff, there's a certain element of like, hey, if so-and-so can do this, I can do this. I'm not dumber than that guy. And there's a certain element of like, why can't I? It's my money and time. If this works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right.
And like the thing with guitar that I think is really fascinating and what keeps it entertaining and interesting to me from a nuts and bolts perspective is there's literally a million ways to get to the end result. Like there is no, as much as the internet seems to believe differently, you can, as long as the end result is good, or what you want it to be, at least. I'll put it at that level. If the end result is what you want it to be, how you get there almost doesn't matter in terms of the fixed path. If that's CNC machines and a plec and a laser and UV cured finishes, or if that's a bandsaw and hand rub finish and whatever, a rock and a hammer and a chisel, if it plays good, sounds good, makes the customer happy, then what's the difference? And the diversity of how to get there is what kind of makes it fun and interesting. And like, and so I get when people get hung up on, oh, it's got to be this or it's got to be that, or if it doesn't have this thing or finish or sleeve on the truss rod or this style, I'm like, you're writing off a whole world of guitars that you've never touched and tried. And I have a formula that I like, and that building nearly 2,000 guitars now has confirmed that I have a certain taste for what I want. That's not necessarily what XYZ wants, and whoever else. But I also know how to get to what they want if they're willing to trust my opinion on that. And that's, and not chasing the homer again. I like this wood formula with this combination, how we build things, and this set of pickups that we've vetted out, that we like these combos. And if you're looking for this, I can tell you which combination gets you there but I'm not trying to chase a totally different thing or offer 65 million different things. And it's almost like the homer, but it's almost, it's a weird thing to be snobby about. If I see a burger place or if somebody tells me about a new burger joint and they're like, oh, they have all these different things, I'm not interested. It almost always, but they have all these crazy toppings. I'm like, cool, I'll bet you $100 the meat's bad. I bet the meat's bland.
Right.
I bet it's just a crappy bun and a crappy patty with 800 toppings on it. I'm like, if you can make a cheese pizza that floors me, or you can make a basic cheese only smash burger or whatever it is that floors me, then I'll take your word for everything else. But if you can't do the two fundamentals right, I'm not interested. And that's kind of where I've reached with, this is what I know works for us. This is what I know consistently achieves the goal that I want, sonically, playability wise, whatever, looks wise, durability, all of that. This is the formula that works for us. If you like so-and-so's formula, then don't make me do their formula. Get it from them. That's what you want. And so at a certain level of like watching people argue down about, and it also, it almost is the artisanal thing again of like, I could not fucking care less what makes a 59 Les Paul great in your mind. I don't care. Right. I don't care. Oh, it's got the hide glue and the other ones don't. That's makes it better. I don't care. It doesn't. Whatever. My formula works fine for me, and the people who own it seem to agree with me. Yeah. And the artists who play it back me up on that. I don't need to have what you think is the requirement to making a guitar great. Yeah. I don't need a Brazilian rosewood fretboard. I don't need this. I don't need that. Those things, I've tried them. I don't find them to be beneficial or better than what their cons outweigh on it to me. If, I don't want a single action truss rod. I don't care if you think they sound better. I want that neck adjustable both directions year round all the time.
Right.
And I don't want it to be dependent on if the neck is backbowed that you're going to have to hope it comes back, or whatever. And if I think the Plek is going to net me, this thing being 1% better than doing it by hand, I'll do it. I want that 1%. I want that formula to continue to improve within what I want it to be. And I'm not, I remember when we switched to urethane finishes, like I was deathly afraid of talking about that. And I had to do it because we couldn't spray nitro. And I really dislike it. I don't like working with nitro. Yeah. And then we were using acrylic lacquer at the time because I could still spray that in the quantities. And that's a slight lateral step, but we were just having fits with it. And, and that thing of like, when you see a 62 Strat that's all checked out now, that's rad. You think it's super cool. Oh, that's cool, right? But when you see a 1962 Strat in 1962, brand new, and it's already checking, that's a detriment. Right. Like a lot of people at the time wouldn't be happy with that. Right. And so, when we switched to urethane, it's because we just could not achieve the quality that we wanted consistently with what was available to me at the time. And I remember, man, I was like, as soon as people find out we're spraying urethane, I'm done. Like, they're never going to buy it. And eventually, like, I just kind of kept my mouth shut, and enough time had gone by, and people just kind of like, oh, these sound just like, and we had done we worked with another guy, Josh Grove at Protocaster Guitars, and Billy at Rock and Roll Relics. Like, we had a relic option that we wouldn't do in house. I'm like, I'd play those guitars side by side. I'm like, they sound identical. They sound exactly the same because the formula underneath is good. And as long as we're not, I mean, there's limitations. Like, if you slather the crap on and leave it an eighth of an inch thick, sure, that is going to affect it. But in the end, if the film thickness is the same film thickness, what's the difference? It doesn't care. It's still doing what I need it to do. And if maybe it is a little detrimental here, we've made up for it over here instead and kind of balanced the scale back out. And I've burned through finishes enough still to tell me that we're not putting it on real thick. So it's, yeah, I think we're doing it in the right way. And so it becomes that thing of like, But I was able to get there because I maybe didn't know better and didn't care so much how it should be done and settled in on what works for our formula. And some of that was because I got advice from Yuha about Spanish cedar, Spanish mahogany, which we call Spanish mahogany because it saves me explaining it 100 times over.
Yes.
And didn't want to work with endangered woods if I could help it. And that paid off much tenfold once, it became a much more of a thing. With a bunch of the sites implementations back in the late aughts, or late tens, I guess, really. And so sometimes not knowing any better is great, and maybe that's the only downside to how much information's out there now. Is okay, I'll give you the counter argument to that, or the other side of this. So I have this car project. I come back, I work on the joke is I work on it 10 minutes a year. I'm on like year 10. And it becomes this thing of like, I want this one to not have the pitfalls or the rushed or whatever of what was at the time, all the cars I built up to that point. But at the same time, I may have put the goalpost so far beyond what I'm capable of and unwilling to A, don't have the time to learn those skills, and B, watching friends of mine who do have those skills, I'm like, dude, are you ever going to actually work on this thing? Or are you in this world of, I think Ryan on The Office said, it's like, I know how I want it to be done and I can't do that, so I'm not going to try. Like, just pick something and work on it 10 minutes and just check the box that you've done something this year on it. Like, and so it can be that end of the spectrum too, of like,
just keeps
it's amazing to watch how far the boundaries have been pushed in not our industry as much as some other industries that I enjoy following. But I'm like, shit, dude, I'm here and everybody's kind of moved past now.
You don't have, because you can doesn't mean you have to. Doug,
that's exactly it.
That was a great way to sort of wrap this part of the conversation. Explaining your sort of thoughts on that. And I'm sorry you moved back to cars, because I was definitely going to drop a Finnish pun at the end of that conversation as to a good spot.
You can still drop it.
It'd be a great spot to finish, but we moved past it. So anyways, Doug, thank you so much for being on Life with Strings Attached. I really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the conversation. For those of you who are in the business of guitar, Doug and I are going to carry on for another, 3 to 5 minutes and just talk about the business of guitar. If you care about that, head on over to patreon.com/business of guitar. Again, that's patreon.com/business of guitar. And you'll hear how this guy has kept his institution running now for a couple of decades. Thanks so much for being on Life with Strings Attached, Doug. Say goodbye for now.
Thank you so much, bud. Good talking to you.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts. And a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.